The rain poured mercilessly, a relentless sheet of water blurring the highway under the dim glow of streetlights. Ethan Carter gripped the steering wheel of his sleek black sedan, his sharp mind racing with thoughts of the high-stakes legal meeting awaiting him in the next city. As one of the most sought-after corporate lawyers in the country, Ethan had built his career on precision, strategy, and an unrelenting drive to win. This meeting could be the key to securing his firm's position in a groundbreaking deal, and there was no room for distractions. But through the rhythmic swish of windshield wipers and the pounding rain, something caught his attention. A figure by the side of the road, hunched and barely visible in the storm's haze. Ethan slowed his car instinctively, his eyes narrowing to make out the details. It was a woman, soaked to the bone, clutching something close to her chest. "What is she doing out here in this weather?" Ethan muttered, his tone edged with both concern and disbelief. Against his better judgment, he pulled over a few feet ahead of her. Rolling down the window, cold rain splashed into the warm interior. "Hey!" he called out, his voice cutting through the storm. "Are you all right? You're going to freeze to death out here." The woman turned, her pale face streaked with rain, her arms wrapped tightly around a small child bundled in a thin blanket. Her voice trembled as much as her frail frame. "Please. My baby is sick. We have nowhere to go." The desperation in Olivia's voice struck Ethan like a thunderclap. For a moment, his lawyer's instinct to avoid entanglement flared up, but the baby's soft, pitiful cry pierced through his resolve, pulling at something deeper within him. He couldn't just leave them here. "Get in," he said firmly, unlocking the door. The woman hesitated, her wide eyes darting between Ethan and the car. She clutched the child closer as if shielding him from a threat only she could see. "Look," Ethan said, his tone softening though his urgency remained. "You don't have a choice. If you stay out here, both of you could end up in the hospital. Or worse. Please, just get in." Finally, she nodded, her movement stiff with exhaustion. Ethan stepped out into the rain, the cold instantly soaking through his tailored suit. Ignoring the discomfort, he opened the passenger door and guided her inside. The warmth of the car's interior enveloped her as she settled into the seat, her hands trembling as she adjusted the small bundle in her arms. Ethan climbed back into the driver's seat and cranked up the heat. The woman glanced at him nervously as the child whimpered softly. "What's your name?" he asked, keeping his eyes on the road as he eased the car back onto the highway. "Olivia," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And this is Liam." Ethan risked a glance at the child. His tiny face was flushed, his breathing shallow, and his small hands peeked out from the soaked blanket. "He doesn't look good," Ethan said, concern evident in his tone. "Have you taken him to a doctor?" "I tried," Olivia replied, her voice breaking. "I couldn't afford it. We've been on the streets for weeks." Ethan's jaw tightened, the absurdity and cruelty of her situation weighing on him. "Listen," he said after a pause, his voice resolute. "I can't take you where I'm going. I have an important meeting. But I have a place nearby. It's safe, and you can stay there until I get back." Olivia's eyes widened, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "Why would you do that? You don't even know me." Ethan sighed. "I don't need to know you to see that you and your son need help. That's all that matters right now." After a long pause, Olivia nodded, her grip on Liam tightening. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan handed her a sleek key fob. "The address is programmed into the GPS," he said firmly. "Take care of your son. That's all I'm asking." When they arrived at a gas station, Ethan helped Olivia into a taxi he had called for her. As it drove away, Liam's soft cries fading into the distance, Ethan stood in the rain for a moment. Something about the encounter unsettled him, though he couldn't pinpoint why. Shaking his head, he returned to his car and sped off, unaware of how much his life had just changed. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, revealing Ethan's penthouse. Olivia stepped in hesitantly, her breath catching at the sight. The massive space was unlike anything she'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased a glittering city skyline, and sleek marble floors reflected the warm glow of modern light fixtures. Everything about it felt untouchable, like stepping into another world. Clutching Liam tightly, Olivia murmured, "This can't be real." Olivia murmured, her voice trembling with disbelief. Every step she took felt surreal as the plush carpet muffled her hesitant movements. The baby whimpered softly in her arms, grounding her in the moment. She moved further inside, letting the warmth of the penthouse replace the cold rain that clung to her skin like a bad memory. Her first priority was Liam. Finding the kitchen, she marveled at its pristine appliances and fully stocked fridge. With trembling hands, she heated a bottle of formula and settled onto the plush couch in the living room. "Here you go, sweet boy," she whispered as she fed him. For the first time in days, she allowed herself to breathe. Still, doubt lingered. Why would someone like Ethan help her? People like him didn't stop for people like her. But as she looked at Liam, his fever subsiding, she pushed the uncertainty aside. Ethan had given them a lifeline, and for now, that was enough. Over the next few days, Olivia began to adjust. At first, she felt like an intruder, careful not to touch anything, but as Liam's health improved, she relaxed, finding small ways to show her gratitude, cleaning the kitchen, folding blankets. These simple acts brought her a sense of control in a life that had felt chaotic for so long. Despite the comfort of the penthouse, Olivia's past lingered in her thoughts. Late at night, as Liam slept peacefully, she gazed out at the city lights, vowing to protect her son at all costs. Ethan had always prided himself on his ability to read people. It was a skill that made him an exceptional lawyer, but Olivia Bennett was a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. Over the days following their encounter, he began to notice things that didn't sit right. Olivia tensed whenever the phone rang, her eyes darting toward Liam as if bracing for danger. She would hurriedly switch off the news whenever a certain name or face appeared. At night, Ethan often heard her pacing the penthouse, whispering into her phone in a voice thick with urgency and fear. One evening, Ethan returned earlier than expected. He found Olivia seated by the window, her silhouette framed against the glowing skyline. She held her phone tightly in both hands, her knuckles white, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Olivia?" Ethan said softly, stepping closer. She flinched at his voice and quickly locked her phone's screen, placing it face down on the table. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, his tone gentle but insistent. "Nothing," she said too quickly, avoiding his gaze. Ethan sighed and sat across from her. "I've given you and Liam a safe place because you needed help. But if I'm going to keep helping you, I need to know the truth. Who are you running from?" Olivia's shoulders sagged as the weight of his question seemed to crush her resolve. Tears brimmed in her eyes, and she finally whispered, "My husband." Ethan stiffened. "Richard Bennett?" she continued, her voice shaking. "He's not just my husband. He's a powerful businessman with deep connections. To the world, he's charming, successful, and philanthropic. But behind closed doors..." Her voice broke, and she wiped her eyes. Ethan waited, his chest tightening with each word. "Behind closed doors, he's controlling, manipulative, and cruel," Olivia said, her voice trembling. "When I told him I was pregnant with Liam, his charm vanished. He didn't see a son, he saw a pawn, someone he could mold and control to suit his agenda. I couldn't let that happen. He didn't care about me or about being a father. He only cared about control." Ethan leaned forward. "So, you left," he said, more a statement than a question. Olivia nodded, her voice barely audible. "I had to. He threatened to take Liam away from me, said he'd ruin my life if I didn't fall in line. I've been running ever since." "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" Ethan asked, his voice quieter now. "Because I didn't think you'd believe me," Olivia admitted, looking at the floor. You're powerful and successful. Everything Richard is. I thought if I told you, you'd call him, or worse, send us back." Ethan frowned, her mistrust cutting deeper than he expected. "Olivia, I'm not your husband," he said firmly. "I helped you because I saw someone who needed it, and now that I know the truth, I'll help you fight him. You're not alone in this." For the first time, Olivia met his gaze, her expression a mixture of relief and fear. "Thank you," she whispered. Ethan's legal instincts kicked in the moment Olivia finished her story. He had spent years battling corporate giants and navigating high-stakes negotiations. But this case was different. This wasn't about business. This was personal. The next morning, Ethan sat Olivia down at the dining table, papers spread before them. "If Richard wants a fight, we'll give him one," he said, his tone resolute. Olivia stared at the documents with a mix of hope and trepidation. "I don't know if I can face him again," she admitted, her hands trembling. "You don't have to face him alone," Ethan assured her. "We'll build a case so strong that he won't know what hit him." Ethan immediately mobilized his resources, contacting his most trusted colleagues and private investigators. "Dig into Richard Bennett's past," he instructed his lead investigator over the phone. "Every deal, every lawsuit, every scandal. Find it all." Within days, the team uncovered a treasure trove of damning evidence. Hidden among Richard's financial records were illegal offshore accounts, fraudulent business dealings, and a pattern of intimidating former employees who dared to cross him. Ethan knew they had the leverage they needed, but the legal battle would still be fierce. As the custody hearing loomed, Olivia grew increasingly anxious. Liam had become her entire world, and the thought of losing him to Richard's schemes was unbearable. Ethan stayed by her side, offering quiet reassurances and unwavering support. The courtroom was tense on the day of the hearing. Richard's lawyers painted Olivia as an unstable, irresponsible mother incapable of providing for her child. Their words were cutting, their accusations relentless. But Ethan was ready. He countered their claims with evidence of Olivia's dedication to Liam, her resilience in the face of adversity, and her genuine desire to protect her son. Then, he revealed the corruption and criminal behavior Richard had worked so hard to hide. The judge's expression shifted as Ethan laid out the facts, his argument compelling and irrefutable. By the time the hearing ended, Olivia felt as though she could finally breathe. The ruling came swiftly, the judge's voice cutting through the tension like a lifeline. "Full custody is granted to Olivia Bennett," he declared, his tone decisive. Olivia felt the words wash over her, a wave of relief crashing into the fear that had gripped her for so long. Tears streamed down her face as she clutched Liam to her chest, his tiny hand resting against her cheek, as if he knew they were finally safe. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "It's over," he said softly. But as Richard stormed out of the courtroom, his furious glare lingered on Ethan. "This isn't over," he hissed. Ethan met his gaze head-on. "Do your worst." The courtroom victory was a monumental relief for Olivia, but the aftermath of Richard's threats left a lingering unease. She held Liam close as they exited the courthouse, her tears a mixture of joy and exhaustion. "Thank you," she whispered to Ethan, her voice thick with emotion. "You don't need to thank me," Ethan replied, his tone steady but gentle. "You fought for Liam. You made this happen." For a brief moment, Olivia allowed herself to believe they could finally move on. That evening, back at the penthouse, Olivia found herself reflecting on how far she and Liam had come. Liam, now free to grow up in peace, played happily on the living room floor, oblivious to the battles fought on his behalf. The penthouse, once a temporary refuge, now felt like a home, a sanctuary where she could rebuild her life. Ethan joined her at the kitchen counter, a quiet but supportive presence. "How are you holding up?" he asked, pouring her a cup of tea. "I feel like I can finally breathe," Olivia admitted. But as her gaze drifted toward Liam, A shadow of doubt clouded her expression. I can't shake the feeling that Richard won't let this go." Ethan leaned forward, his voice calm but resolute. "Let him try. Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." Olivia met his gaze, and for the first time, she believed it. Weeks passed, and life slowly began to settle into a new rhythm for Olivia and Liam. The penthouse, once a symbol of everything she thought was beyond her reach, had become a true home. With Ethan's unwavering support, Olivia found herself dreaming of a future she once thought impossible. One day, Olivia stood in the kitchen preparing lunch while Liam babbled happily in his high chair. Ethan walked in, loosening his tie after another long day. "Something smells good," he said, smiling as he leaned against the counter. Olivia returned his smile. "Just some grilled cheese and soup, nothing fancy." "It's perfect," Ethan said, his tone carrying a warmth that made her pause. As they ate, their conversation flowed naturally. Olivia talked about Liam's latest milestones, his newfound love for stacking blocks, and his attempts at saying "mama." Ethan shared stories from his day, though his usual focus on work seemed to wane in favor of moments like these. After lunch, Ethan sat on the floor with Liam, helping him build a tower from colorful blocks. Olivia watched them from the couch, her heart swelling with a sense of peace she hadn't felt in years. She realized she no longer felt like a guest in Ethan's world. She belonged here. Inspired by this newfound stability, Olivia decided it was time to reclaim her independence. With Ethan's encouragement, she applied for a position at a local nonprofit that assisted women and children escaping abusive situations. When she got the job, she felt a renewed sense of purpose. "This is exactly what you're meant to do," Ethan told her when she shared the news. "It feels like it," Olivia admitted. "I want to help others the way you helped me." As Olivia settled into her new role, Ethan found himself spending more and more time at home. The high-stakes deals and endless negotiations that once defined his life no longer seemed as important. Olivia and Liam had become his family, though he hadn't yet said the words aloud. One quiet evening, as Liam slept soundly in his crib, Ethan and Olivia sat together on the balcony. The city lights sparkled like a sea of stars below them. "I don't think I've ever thanked you properly," Olivia said, her voice soft. Ethan turned to her, his expression earnest. "You don't need to thank me. Helping you and Liam has been the best decision I've ever made." She smiled, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You've given us so much more than I ever thought possible." Ethan reached for her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. "You and Liam have given me more than I ever knew I needed."